Welcome back to Between Two White Coats, a podcast designed to help you be the healthiest version of yourself. I'm Dr. Michelle Plaster, a family medicine doctor.
And I'm her co-host, Amber Foster, a family nurse practitioner. In our combined 30 years in medicine, we've seen a lot.
We're discussing key issues surrounding health and wellness, answering some of our biggest questions, overcoming health obstacles, and giving patient-centered advice in hopes of educating you and providing the tools you need to live a healthy life.
If you find our podcast helpful, please consider subscribing so you don't miss an episode. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star rating and review. This will help other people find our podcast.
Thanks for joining us. We look forward to serving you.
Welcome to this episode of Between Two White Coats. Today, we're going to talk about decoding the food label.
Yeah, this is harder than what it should be, right?
Yes.
And overwhelming. And I think when things are hard and overwhelming, we just don't do it. And then we don't really know what we're just putting in our body.
We're guessing what we put in our body.
Yes.
So initially when we were prepping for this episode, I went and looked at how to read food labels because I think sometimes we do take for granted. And what's a serving size? I barely cook.
Yes.
When it says a cup, do I really know what that is? Unless it tells me 5 things, it's going to be 5 pretzels. Then am I going to really guesstimate what that is? And probably not.
Yeah. So I also went and read how to read a food label, and there may have been a couple of naps that ended up getting thrown in. That is some boring stuff.
Yes.
And so let's just make it simple. Let's try to, what's the quick way when I'm in the grocery store to look at a few things and decide how to buy the best one?
Yes.
What is it that we do when we're shopping? And how do you make this less difficult, less time consuming? Because my whole goal in the grocery store is to be in there about 3 seconds. Yes. And now, we're doing all this. Please just deliver the groceries to my house. You don't even look at the labels. Yeah. So if I'm Google searching and trying to figure this stuff out, how do I know how to make the best choices for myself and my family?
Personally, I honestly don't really read food labels because I have celiac. And so one of the first things I do if I'm looking at a box or I'm looking at processed type food is does it have wheat? May contain. So the bold print at the bottom. And so if it may contain wheat, well, then guess what? That's usually not coming to my house.
Yes.
So that kind of is the easiest way that I read food labels.
And my work around food labels, because I dislike doing it, is I try to eat foods that don't have labels.
Yeah.
And so the whole shop on the outside of the grocery store, buy fruits and vegetables, buy, lean meats, buy stuff that is not processed and does not have all these ingredients. But the very first thing I do for things that do have a label is I go straight to the ingredients. I don't look at all of the how many carbs and how many sugars and what's the serving size. I go straight to the ingredients. And if it has 5, 6 or more ingredients, I just put it down. I just try to simplify what's going into our system. I believe all these extra ingredients, if there are things you can't pronounce or it very much feels like a science experiment, then I don't think you need to be putting in your body. If high fructose corn syrup is in the ingredient list or one of the top ingredients, I try not to buy it. I want things that are clean and real as much as possible, try to eat real food. And so that kind of simplifies it because if I'm choosing between 3 or 4 different things, I'll go with the one with the fewest ingredients, the most natural things that I recognize that exist on this earth and weren't made as a science experiment. And then I think I go straight to serving size in that it's great if I can tell, but if I'm going to be looking at calories, sugar, and I'm comparing.
And sometimes with diets, if people are monitoring diet, they want to know we can totally nerd out and do what's your total carb, and then you take your minus fiber and it gives you kind of really what you're getting as far as a carb.
But if I'm comparing, especially if you're trying to lose weight or other things, and maybe you're looking at breakfast cereals and you're trying to buy a breakfast cereal for your kid that has the least amount of sugar in it. And so if you look at the amount of sugar or the amount of carbs and you're comparing box A to box B, you have to look at the serving size, because if one is a half cup and one is a cup, then you've got to do the math to go, well, that's actually going to be twice the amount when I change the serving size.
Yeah. So it gets kind of complicated and a little convoluted for people.
Yeah, but serving size at least lets you know what you're comparing. Are you comparing one amount to the same amount?
And who really ever eats a serving size? Let's talk about that.
Right.
No one.
And if you go, oh, this only has 15 calories and that's in one pretzel stick. And then you're like, oh, that's not really 15 calories because I'm not going to eat one serving size.
And that's 150.
Yes. And so I think that serving size matters if you're comparing, and serving size matters if you're trying to watch how many calories is in something. Otherwise, I think you simplify a food label to be what matters to you.
Yeah.
Like right now in this stage of my life, I'm really trying to increase my protein. And so I look at the ingredients and go, is this something I want to put in my body? And then I go straight to the protein. And if I'm trying to get more protein with every meal, then I'm trying to get something that at my meal, I want to have 30 or 40 grams of protein. I'm looking at the protein. At other times in my life, I'm trying to lose weight. I'm looking at the calories or I'm looking at the carbs. If you're a diabetic, you want to look at the sugar, you want to look at the carbs, and there are so many things on the food label. There's the refined sugar, the added sugar, the whatever else, and then there's the carb count.
Well, and the fats.
But
and
if you're trying to piece together your sugar stuff, just look at the carbs. Compare one carbs to the next. Know how many carbs you're trying to have at a meal. Know what all is going to be in that meal, and just simplify it down. The food label has to have all of this.
And we're thankful for them. Like I'm not.
Yes. But it's not all for us. It's not all like for the consumer to have to look at all of this stuff. So if you have a specific goal, if you're trying to reduce your sugar, then focus on that. If you're trying to increase your protein, focus on that. If you have heart disease or high cholesterol and you're trying to reduce your fats, then focus on the fats.
Yeah.
And, maybe compare one box to the next and try to find the ones that have the least amount of saturated fat. So if you're going to look at celiac because of course that matters. And then
that's really all I look at.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, well, if that's got wheat, I can't have it. Honestly, I don't really buy a ton of things that have a ton of food labels. Like I made for for my children. But often those things we're buying are protein bars or something because they're athletes. And so, I would look at that to see which maybe one would have, my daughters can not tolerate lactose as much. So like even like looking for milk stuff.
Yeah, so you're just customizing
I'm
it
just
to what you
customizing
need.
it per family member. No, my son will eat an entire box of Captain Crunch in one sitting, like use a mixing bowl. So like, who cares about the food label? They eat every bit of it.
Right.
So you got
it's
all
not
the
a serving
sugar
size.
and carbs. Yeah. So that's what I do personally. But we truly, like I typically buy groceries once a week. I don't buy more than, most of the time when you come to my house, we look like we're starving because we are buying whole foods and tend not to buy as many things that are processed.
I think when you're doing these types of things and trying to get healthy, make it simple for yourself. You're only going to be able to stick with stuff that's easy. There are a lot of apps. There is a lot of technology that can guide you through this. Many times you can scan the QR code on the box and it'll bring up, this is what you need to know if whatever your goals are.
Yeah.
So you can customize. MyFitnessPal and a number of other apps will allow you to just kind of scan stuff and look at your macronutrients and figure out where you're going with it.
Gluten-free. Like I would use that just to double check.
Yeah.
That I wasn't missing something. So those are super helpful.
So you can use the technology to make this easier and play with a few different apps and see what works for you. There are a ton of them out there. Yeah. And then I think the other thing is kind of maybe if you're overwhelmed with grocery shopping and trying to eat healthy, one row, read the food labels, do some comparison, figure out this one has lower sugar, this one has fewer calories. I'm working on protein. This one has more protein. And then you'll know this is the one we're going to choose
every time.
Each time I'm just grabbing
because when you grab an Oreo box, it's going to just kind of suck.
And you don't really have to read the food label because this is your treat.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Hydrogenized everything. It is what it is. But it tastes good.
Yeah.
And then maybe the next time you go to the store, you do a different aisle. And then you do a little bit of comparison. And over time, over a few weeks of shopping, you'll be making better choices. Yeah. But our biggest advice on food labels, you can go to, if you're a diabetic, American Diabetes Association will step you through how to read a label. If you have heart disease, American Heart Association will step you through how to read a label.
Well, and some of the labels also, labels do have like daily value percentage of certain things like sodium and vitamins. And I think that gets confusing because you're looking at something that says like it's 4% and then the next thing's 100%. And you're like, am I going to overdose on, like it just becomes so confusing.
It does. It's hard. You pretty much have to be a registered dietitian to
and
figure
we're so
all
thankful
this
for
stuff
those
out.
people that can do that.
Yes. But we've sat with a lot of people and talked about how to read a food label and all these things. It doesn't stick. It's hard and we're busy and overwhelmed. And so figure out what's going to work for you. Choose a few solid things that are better. Each time you go, maybe work on a different aisle, try different things. and try
Because you
to
can
get
spend a lot of time. There's tons. I mean, you go to a grocery store, we're so
forever.
overwhelmed.
And there's and just try to make a slightly better choice. Every time you're choosing something, maybe you can upgrade to a slightly better choice,
Yeah.
but don't get overwhelmed with the labels. The other thing that I think is really overwhelming and difficult for people is the fad diets.
Yeah.
And whether it's the fad diet or whether it's actually a good diet, something gets thrown out there. So, am I supposed to be keto? Am I supposed to be Mediterranean?
Carnivores.
Right?
jumping.
What is that? And then
Paleo, Whole30. I saw the cabbage soup diet. Remember
cabbage
that?
soup never goes away.
It never goes away. That sucker stays around forever.
Did you ever do the cabbage soup diet?
I feel like I have tasted it. My parents did it. I remember my parents doing it.
My mom and
Obviously,
I did it.
that
I
didn't
was
stick.
probably like in middle school, and my mom and I did it.
Yeah.
And you eat nothing but this cabbage soup for days, so
Yes.
of course you're going to lose weight.
I mean, my dad had a massive heart attack. Of course, it stuck. Right?
It's not tasty. This cabbage soup, but that's probably why people lose weight. It's not tasty.
Yeah, you're like, I'll just fast instead. But intermittent fasting's a thing, and like zone diet and vegan.
Yeah.
Like you can be super overwhelmed.
So when your patient comes in and says, I'd like to eat better, or tell me which diet I'm supposed to be on.
You know, a lot of it depends on their goals, right? And so like as far as like heart healthy, like the number one diet that has been like for years has been the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
That one is pretty tried and true. But I will listen. Like some people, you know, choose not to eat meat, and some people, you know, so trying to help those people. I often, if it becomes really like super specialized, I'll refer to a dietitian, because that's definitely not my area. I'll tell people, I'll tell you what I know and I'll tell you what I don't know. And I eat meat, so I'm not going to be your best vegan resource. And so like I'll often refer them to dietitian or nutrition. But it really depends on the patient's goals. What it boils down to is mostly if you're trying to lose weight, it's calories in versus calories out, regardless of what diet you're following.
Yeah, you have
It
to.
is literally
You have to be
in
smart
versus
about your
out.
calories, and you have to be smart about your portions. Yeah.
And so that's what I mean, if you across the board look at it, some of it's just dumb stuff. Like, I mean, I'm sure the cabbage soup diet had its moment, but all in all, like you can't sustain life on that. Like that was great for a week, but let's
And
just move on.
even keto and low carb, people don't sustain life on that. And then when they add
because you
carbs
eat the Oreo
back,
in
they
the
gain a lot
aisle,
of
you're
weight.
done for.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
right. And then picks up the Oreo package. So it really is more what's going to work for you. What can you stick with? You mentioned this earlier, like make the better choice. So I'll have patients, I'm like, okay, you drink a soda with every meal. How about like, let's just drink water at meals. Can we just start with something simple?
Yeah.
And then make something like take a new good healthy habit and exchange it.
Yeah.
So instead of
I think that's so first of all, I would say just stay away from the fad diets. I think it's very hard to change everything at once, and you're going to stick with it for a short period, and it's a fad because it's going to come and go. And really what we're asking you to do is be smart about what you eat. Try to put healthy stuff into your body. And so don't become a student of the fad diet, because it's going to come and go in your life, and that's not what we're trying to do.
I'm thinking like they're all coming in my head.
Absolutely.
There's books. I mean, people buy them. I mean, they become New York Times bestsellers.
And then they
because
become
everybody's
entire
curious.
food processing, like the South Beach cookies and the South Beach chips. And, and
I'm not hating on those people. Good for you. Like, great job.
And if you're doing those things and it's working for you, great. But my concern would be is that you can't continue. It's not sustainable. I would say if I recommend a diet to someone, if someone's saying, well, what kind of dietary recommendations do you have? I think Mediterranean is a really great diet to follow. And it's not a fad diet. It's how people eat in the Mediterranean area. And
those
so,
people are gorgeous. Have you seen them?
Yes, right. Humans. And don't we want to look like that? And so it's more heavy in fish. It's lean meats, lot of healthy fats, like olive oils and avocados, and fruits and vegetables. You know, really, and less processed food. So you know, I think all of that. Our advice on your diet would be try to eat real food. Which means less processed. Try to eat lean meats, healthy fruits and vegetables. What I would say, you know, if people have a moral or religious reason for what they eat, then of course that is your moral and religious decision, and stick with it. And so this is not a comment to that. But I would say if someone is just saying, I would like to eat as healthy as possible, then I discourage vegan and vegetarian. I really feel like it's hard to get enough protein. And if you're not going to supplement or you're not going to really become a student of that, you may end up being protein deficient, and you may end up getting under muscled, under lean mass, and that's a problem, particularly with aging.
But I've also seen vegetarians that will eat the processed foods, and so then you would think they would be. I mean, they do have not enough lean mass, but then
I've often thought it was interesting that it's called vegetarian, because what
they don't eat vegetables.
Because there are vegetarians who eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, but what vegetarian really means is no meat.
Yeah.
So we should have called it the no meat diet, because unfortunately sometimes when people remove meat, these heavy protein meats are very filling, and they allow you to continue to feel full. And many times when you remove that, you substitute in not fruits and vegetables, but processed carbohydrates. Yeah. And so you're eating a lot more processed food, or you're eating a lot of grains, a lot of carbs, breads, potatoes, and that becomes not a healthy alternative. Yeah. I mean, I would tell anyone, eat as many fruits and vegetables as you can. Most of us aren't getting 3 to 4 servings of fruits and vegetables in a day. And that is nutritionally dense food. So, choose nutritionally dense food, fruits and vegetables, but also nutritionally dense food are lean meats. Mm-hmm. And when you remove that, you really have to take a lot of effort to make sure you're replacing with enough protein. I think pescatarian is a great idea too. So if you really want to, maybe you have heart disease and your cardiologist has said, you got to stop eating the marbleized steaks. But instead of going vegetarian, you keep in the fish, because there's so many healthy fats in fish. And I get nervous when people remove all the meats. Yeah. I think that becomes a little problematic. And so I don't typically recommend for people to do that unless they're students of it. Yeah. I know people who are extremely healthy vegans, but it's hard work. Yeah. And when you travel and other things, it's easy to become anemic. You've really got to be on top of that. Yeah. So, takeaway would be do the healthy diet that works for you. I think Mediterranean is a great place to start if you're really researching or wanting to have some boundaries around what you're eating or have some guidelines. I also think that to simplify it, the best way to read a label is to not have a label to read. Yeah. And so go with what comes from the earth, fruits, vegetables, lean meats, the things that don't tend to have a label. But when you are looking at labels, simplify it for yourself. Make sure you're hitting your health goals. Maybe speak with your healthcare provider about, well, what should I be focused on? Fewer carbs, less sugar, more protein. It matters for what age and stage you are in your life as to what you're trying to do.
And what other potential medical problems you already have or could have.
And then when you do look at a label and the label has a whole bunch of stuff in it, maybe just avoid that. Yeah. Water doesn't have a label. Yeah. That would be a great thing to drink a lot more of.
Start with that.
So, all of this, like how to read a food label, I don't really care. I don't really know. And I find that to be boring and overwhelming. I think that you look at it and you try to avoid the stuff that you don't need. You try to have more of the stuff that you do need. You know where to look to quickly find that. Make it simple so that being healthy isn't overwhelming, and so that you can go to the grocery store and not just be shopping for what you want, but shopping for what your body needs, and be tuned into that. But our takeaway message would be simplify it. Yeah. Keep it simple. Neither of us are spending hours in the grocery store reading food labels.
I wish I had the time to do it, but we don't have time for that.
And even if I did have time, I'd choose something else to do
book.
with it.
What book are you reading? That's what we were going to mention. Yeah, I was like, I'd read a book, and then I'm like, oh yes. So
let's finish up with something more fun than a food label. A book there are 2 books I would recommend from a health and wellness perspective. I read this. You read this a year or 2 ago. But Peter Attia is doing a lot of great work. Dr. Peter Attia in longevity. And he has a book, Outlive, and
it's a big book.
It's a big book, but it really breaks chapters down. A chapter on sleep, a chapter on stress, a chapter on nutrition. There are takeaways for everyone, and I feel like that's a great book. And then my mission right now in my postmenopausal life is to build muscle. And so I've just started Forever Strong by Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. And she is very big on skeletal muscle.
Have you seen her?
Have you?
She is a skeletal muscle.
I know, right? She is a strong woman.
Yes.
I respect everything about her.
Yeah.
And so I'm just getting started on that book, but that's, I think, focusing on building muscle is a great thing.
So I am a nerd and read all the time. And so I try to read some medical stuff and then just some nerdy stuff, which may not be medical. And then also I'm trying to incorporate more fiction because I like it. So recently I've been reading the American Urologic Association because that sounds fun.
You lost me. You lost me at American.
I was reading a lot. I'm done.
Any society?
Yes, any society. But I've actually been doing a lot of research on testosterone and honestly testosterone in men just to get a little bit more well-versed in that. Something we do a lot here in our clinic. And super interesting. Can totally nerd out on that. So that's my nerdy thing. My kind of more sciencey thing, but it's a little bit more pleasurable to read is The New Menopause by Dr. Marie Claire Haver. She is an OBGYN who is honestly kind of, I think she still practices an OBGYN, but like her patient population was aging with her. And then so she's just kind of gotten to this space. And so her book is actually really, really good. Highly recommend it. And then, which is not fiction, but a friend really recently gifted me this book. And I almost have bought it like a bazillion times and then just haven't because I was like, oh, I'll get that later because like I want to read it, but it wasn't like top on my list to purchase is Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer, which he wrote the book. And we mentioned it on a previous podcast about with Dr. Sammy Chang about the elimination of hurry was his, I don't know if it was his first book, but it was the first one I read. And so this is kind of his follow-up maybe.
What was the name of it again?
John Mark Comer.
What's the name of the book?
Elimination of Hurry.
Elimination of Hurry.
I might have screwed that up, but it's ish. That's kind of the title if I didn't get it exactly correct. So I have that one on my nightstand to start.
Awesome.
So,
All right.
We're kind of nerds. Are we nerds? I feel like that might be.
And I think our takeaway is read a book, not a label.
Label. There you go.
Yeah. But thank you so much for joining us today. And until next time, take care of yourself. We like to leave you on a good note. Here's today's Tell Me Something Good. Something good is new beginnings. Every day is a new beginning, a new opportunity. Every year, we really recognize that we have some opportunities for new beginnings. So recognize an opportunity for a new beginning today, take advantage of it, and begin something exciting. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, take care of yourself.